The shimmering skyline of Tralix stretched into the heavens, its jagged spires of iridescent crystal pulsing with an energy both alien and mesmerizing. Dr. Roland Hayes adjusted the translator device tucked into his ear and muttered, "Incredible. It's like the city is alive." Lieutenant Eric Mason, standing a few steps behind, folded his arms. "Alive or watching us. Feels like this place could read my thoughts." His tone carried a mix of wonder and unease, his military instincts always on high alert. "You're not wrong," Dr. Hayes replied, his analytical gaze fixed on a spire's shifting colors with the rhythm of their footsteps. "Their architecture is biologically integrated. It responds to stimuli, light, sound, even movement. Amazing, really." Behind them, Sergeant Mark Big Rig Thompson let out a low whistle. "Amazing or creepy, Doc? Not sure I like the idea of buildings with feelings." Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime. Turning, they found Vryla, their guide, standing a few feet away. Her luminous silver skin reflected the city's hues, and her elongated eyes glimmered with a curiosity that matched their own. "You find our city disconcerting, Sergeant?" she asked, her voice a harmonious blend of tones, as though two people were speaking at once. Thompson scratched the back of his neck. "No disrespect, ma'am. Just not used to, glowing walls." Vryla's lips curved into what might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell with her alien physiology. "Your honesty is appreciated. It is why we invited your kind here, to understand and be understood." She gestured for them to follow. The group was led through a labyrinth of corridors that seemed to shift as they moved, each turn unveiling a new marvel of alien ingenuity. Finally, they entered a spacious chamber where holographic displays floated in midair, each one showing complex diagrams of various life forms. The centerpiece of the room was a large, transparent sphere containing a swirling, luminous substance. "This is our Hall of Biogenesis," Vryla announced. "Here, we study the reproductive systems of countless species across the galaxy. It is a subject of immense fascination to us." Dr. Hayes stepped forward, his professional demeanor masking his own unease. "Fascinating. I assume your people have a unique approach to reproduction." Vryla inclined her head. "Indeed. Our species reproduces through a process of energy transference and genetic imprinting. It is efficient, devoid of unpredictability or emotional interference." Her gaze shifted to the humans. "But your methods, they intrigue us. They are, shall we say, unique among the advanced species we have encountered." Lieutenant Mason stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" Vryla's eyes glimmered with amusement. "Forgive me. I mean no offense. It is simply that your species exhibits an unusual blend of physicality and emotional attachment in reproduction. It raises many questions." Sensing the discomfort in the room, Dr. Hayes interjected. "Perhaps we can save those questions for later. For now, we'd love to learn more about your society's broader practices." But Vryla was not so easily deterred. "Oh, but this is a matter of great importance to us. Understanding the biological and emotional dynamics of reproduction is crucial to understanding your species as a whole." Lieutenant Mason shot Thompson a look, muttering under his breath, "I knew this was going to get weird." Ignoring the exchange, Vryla continued. "Tell me, humans, why do you seem so uncomfortable discussing this aspect of your existence? Is it not fundamental to your survival?" The question hung in the air, a quiet challenge none of them were quite prepared to answer. Dr. Hayes cleared his throat. "It's a cultural thing. Humans have a tendency to compartmentalize certain topics. Reproduction is one of them." "Curious," Vryla said, her voice lilting with genuine curiosity. "Such barriers to understanding must make communication between your kind difficult." Mason finally broke his silence. "It's not about barriers. It's about—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Boundaries." Vryla tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Boundaries are an intriguing concept. Perhaps you can explain them in greater detail." Dr. Hayes, Sensing the need to defuse the tension, gestured to the glowing sphere in the center of the room. Maybe it's better if we show you instead of explain. The statement sparked a glimmer of excitement in Riley's gaze. Yes, a demonstration would be most enlightening. Mason groaned softly, pinching the bridge of his nose. This is going to be a long day. As they followed Vryla deeper into the hall, the atmosphere grew heavier with anticipation and an unspoken unease. Whatever lay ahead promised to be both enlightening and profoundly uncomfortable. The laboratory was a kaleidoscope of light and sound, with holographic diagrams spinning lazily in the air, depicting intricate anatomical details of species far stranger than any of the humans could imagine. The walls shimmered with a soft, organic glow, pulsing rhythmically, as if alive. Lieutenant Eric Mason kept his eyes fixed on the shifting images, his jaw tightening with every second. This place feels like the inside of someone's brain, he muttered to no one in particular. Or a nightmare, added Sergeant Mark Thompson, attempting to lighten the mood, though his uneasy chuckle betrayed him. Dr. Roland Hayes ignored their commentary, too engrossed in the visuals. He gestured toward a hovering diagram of an alien life form with limbs like flowing ribbons of light. This must be how they document reproductive biology. Fascinating. I would not use the word fascinating, Mason replied dryly. Disturbing works just fine. Vryla, standing at the center of the room, seemed oblivious to their discomfort. She raised one elegant, elongated hand, and the holograms shifted, displaying a simplified but detailed rendering of the human reproductive system. This, she began, her voice calm yet tinged with intrigue, is the most puzzling of all. Your method of reproduction is unusually complex for a species of your developmental stage. Please explain. The room fell into an awkward silence. Thompson cleared his throat, trying and failing to suppress a smirk. Mason shifted uncomfortably, crossing his arms. Hayes, ever the diplomat, stepped forward. Our reproduction is both a biological and emotional process, he explained carefully. It involves genetic material being combined from two individuals, male and female, through physical interaction. Vryla blinked. Her silver skin seemed to ripple slightly, betraying what might have been confusion or horror. You mean you physically combine your organic material? Directly? Mason let out a low-grown muttering. Here we go. Yes, Hayes replied, maintaining his composure. It's a highly complex and deeply personal act. And this is done willingly? Vryla asked, her voice rising in pitch. She stared at them as if they'd just confessed to performing arcane rituals. Most of the time, yes, Thompson interjected with a shrug, unable to resist. It's not like we draw straws or anything. Mason shot him a sharp look. Not helping, big rig. Vryla's glowing eyes darted between them, her expression growing more bewildered. But why? Surely there are more efficient methods. Why introduce unpredictability, physical vulnerability, and emotional attachment into something so fundamental to your species' survival? Because we're not machines, Mason snapped, his frustration finally bubbling to the surface. We're human. It's messy, sure, but it works. Vryla tilted her head, studying him with unnerving intensity. Messy yet effective. An interesting dichotomy. It's more than just biology, Hayes said, trying to redirect the conversation. For humans, reproduction isn't purely about survival. It's also about connection. Families, relationships, these bonds are what drive us as a species. Vryla considered this, her luminous gaze flickering with something akin to disbelief. So, the act is both functional and emotional? How peculiar. Peculiar doesn't begin to cover it, Mason muttered, earning a smirk from Thompson. The alien moved closer to the hologram, her elongated fingers hovering over the display. The image shifted, highlighting specific organs. This level of integration between physicality and emotion is unique in our studies. Most advanced species have long abandoned such inefficiencies. Well, Thompson said, leaning casually against a nearby console. You might call it inefficient, but it's a hell of a lot more fun than whatever you've got going on. Vryla blinked at him, clearly missing the humor. Fun? You associate reproduction with enjoyment. Mason sighed, running a hand down his face. You're not going to get it. Just accept that we're weird and move on. But Vryla wasn't ready to move on. Perhaps this is why humans are so unpredictable. Such a volatile system must produce equally volatile offspring. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Volatile isn't the word we'd use. Passionate, maybe. Creative. Resilient. Resilient, Vryla repeated softly, her tone contemplative. Perhaps. But surely this chaos has a cost. The room fell silent again. Tension thickened the air. For a moment, even the alien laboratory seemed to dim, as if responding to the unease. Finally, Vryla straightened, her expression unreadable. This discussion has raised many questions. I will need time to process. She gestured toward the exit. Shall we continue? Mason exchanged a glance with Hayes, his brow furrowed. Great. Let's traumatize her somewhere else. Hayes ignored the quip, his attention focused on Vryla's unreadable expression. The group filed out, leaving behind the swirling holograms and lingering discomfort, knowing the day's revelations were far from over. The group found themselves in a serene garden nestled within the heart of Tralix. Unlike Earth's flora, the plants here shimmered with faint bioluminescence, their leaves swaying gently despite the absence of wind. Streams of glowing liquid flowed through transparent channels, casting dappled light across the faces of the humans. This is one of our contemplation gardens, Vryla explained as she led them to a circular platform surrounded by softly glowing vines. It is a place for reflection and intellectual discourse. I believe it is fitting for our current discussion. Dr. Hayes nodded, his curiosity undimmed despite the earlier awkwardness. It's beautiful, peaceful, a perfect setting to understand your perspective better. Vryla turned to him, her silver skin gleaming faintly in the ambient light. I must admit, I find your reproductive practices both inefficient and unnecessarily fraught with emotional complexities. It seems counterproductive for a species that claims to value progress and order. Lieutenant Mason, seated on a low, translucent bench, leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. We're not robots, he said firmly. Efficiency isn't the only thing that matters to us. And yet, Vryla countered, your inefficiency introduces conflict. Emotional attachment clouds judgment. Relationships create instability. Why do you persist in clinging to these archaic methods? Because it's what makes us human, Mason shot back. Look, I get that it sounds messy to you, but that mess is what drives us, what pushes us to create, to fight for something, to survive. Dr. Hayes interjected, his tone measured. For humans, reproduction isn't just about biology. It's about connection, about building families and communities. Those bonds are our strength, not a weakness. Vryla tilted her head, her luminous eyes narrowing. Strength? You mean to suggest that your chaos has value? Mason straightened, a faint smile tugging at his lips. More than you'd think. He paused, then added, my parents met during a war. They didn't have much in common, different cultures, different backgrounds, but they found each other, fell in love, and that bond got them through some of the worst times imaginable. Without that connection, I wouldn't be here. Without stories like theirs, humanity wouldn't have made it this far. The alien ambassador was silent for a long moment, her expression inscrutable. Finally, she said, your species is driven by emotional bonds to an extent I have never encountered. Perhaps it explains your resilience and your volatility. Volatility? Sergeant Thompson chimed in with a grin. You mean passion. We might be a little chaotic, but that chaos is what gets things done. Vryla's gaze shifted to Thompson, her lips curling in what could almost be a smile. Perhaps you are correct, Sergeant, but one must wonder, how sustainable is such chaos? Hayes, ever the diplomat, folded his hands. The question isn't about sustainability. It's about adaptability. Our emotions, our bonds, they're not perfect, but they drive us to evolve, to overcome challenges no matter how great. For the first time, Vryla seemed genuinely contemplative. She turned her gaze to the glowing vines, her voice soft. Perhaps your unpredictability is your greatest strength, or perhaps it will be your undoing. As the humans exchanged uneasy glances, she turned back to them, her luminous eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. There is much to learn from you, but there is much about you that remains unsettling. Mason stood, brushing off his uniform. Unsettling's just another word for interesting. You'll figure us out eventually. Vryla's gaze lingered on him for a moment before she nodded. Perhaps. The soft hum of the garden deepened the silence, leaving the humans with the distinct sense that the day's revelations were far from over. The humans stood on the observation platform, overlooking the vast, crystalline city of Tralix. The alien sun hung low on the horizon, casting the skyline in hues of silver and violet. The air hummed softly, a calming resonance that felt almost alive. "This is where we must part," Vryla said, her tone steady but laced with something unspoken, an emotion she had yet to name. She regarded the humans with her unblinking, luminous gaze. "Your visit has been enlightening." Dr. Roland Hayes nodded, clasping his hands behind his back. "The feeling is mutual. Understanding your people has given us a great deal to reflect upon, and vice versa," Vryla replied. "Your species is unlike any we have encountered. Your emotional complexities, your inefficiencies," she paused, her expression softening slightly, "and your passion, these are qualities that defy logic, yet seem integral to your survival. It is perplexing." Lieutenant Eric Mason let out a short laugh, his arms crossed. "We get that a lot." He stepped forward, meeting Vryla's gaze. "But you'll see, our chaos isn't just noise. It's what makes us human. It's what makes us fight for what matters." "Fight," Vryla repeated, as if testing the word's weight. An intriguing concept, yet one that often brings destruction. "True," Mason admitted, "but it also brings change. Sometimes you have to break something to rebuild it stronger." Dr. Hayes interjected gently. "We don't seek to justify all our flaws. We know our methods aren't perfect, but they've shaped who we are, just as your species' order and precision have shaped you." Vryla turned to Hayes, her silver skin catching the fading light. "Perhaps there is wisdom in embracing imperfection. It is unsettling to consider, but not without merit." Sergeant Mark Thompson, leaning casually against the railing, grinned. "See, we're growing on you already." The faintest hint of amusement flickered in Vryla's eyes. "You are certainly memorable, Sergeant." She took a step closer, her gaze sweeping over the group. "Your visit has challenged many of our assumptions. It seems there is much for both of our species to learn. Perhaps, in time, we will understand each other more fully." Mason extended a hand toward her, his expression softened by something close to respect. "Let's hope so." Vryla hesitated, studying the gesture. Slowly, she extended her own elongated hand, her movements deliberate and cautious. When their hands met, the contact was brief but profound, a bridge between two worlds. "Your customs are strange," she said, her tone neutral yet tinged with curiosity. "But I will remember this one." As the humans boarded their vessel, the city of Tralix shimmered in the distance, its spires pulsing faintly as if alive. Inside the ship, Thompson leaned against the window, watching Vryla recede into the alien glow. "Think we freaked her out enough?" he joked, breaking the silence. Mason shook his head with a faint smile. "Nah, just enough to keep her curious." Dr. Hayes glanced out at the city one last time. "Curiosity is the first step toward understanding. Let's hope we gave her something worth thinking about." The ship's engines hummed to life, and as they ascended into the star-streaked sky, Vryla stood alone on the platform below, watching their departure with a mixture of confusion, respect, and something she might one day recognize as hope.